were having an estimate of Arnold's poetry. We were halfway through, and we knew that Arnold is very close to the Greek dramatist Sophocles, and we go on having a wider view of his poetic craft. Despite this persistent admiration, Arnold did not quite achieve balance, restraint, and evenness of temperament in his poems. That is to say, the moods and propensities which he feared and denied in himself are surfaced in the poetry. An interesting example of this phenomenon is Empedocles on Aetna, which appeared in 1852, in which the hero is alienated from other human beings and from nature also, not finding peace in his quest for a rational understanding of the world, and finally takes down his own life. In 1853, Arnold rejected the poem because in it the suffering finds no outlet in action. And because in the situations it depicts, there is inevitably something morbid, in the description of them, something monotonous. And this monotonousness or boredom or ennui, or call it whatever you will, permeates his entire poetry. One poem after another emphasizes this significant aspect of the modern life is visited by this. The poet wants to convey something, he wants to put across his idea to the audience, or the audience seems rather disinterested, lethargic, inattentive. They are lost in their own problems, and they seem very indifferent to what the poet says. So this is very galling to the poet. Arnold's criticism obviously arises from his ideals, but as Frank Kermode has pointed out, the poem is one of the most interesting of the longer 19th century poems. We received an Lionel Trilling, another critic, refers to the almost constant success Arnold has with the theme of controlled self-pity. It's not surprising, therefore, that although Arnold was a classicist by education, a classicist by intellectual choice, his feelings were susceptible to romanticization. He refrained from extravagance of expression. He eschewed from extravagance of emotion, and he underscored the need for wholeness and structural balance in a poem. The unity, the harmony, the proportion, the order, the symmetry, which are the hallmarks of a classical poem, but could never successfully create an objective narrative or dramatic work. This poetic center remained at the core of his own doubts and despairs, and even in his later poems, as Douglas Bush has noted, his intellectual melancholy melts away into the richly Keatsian background of scenery and myth. The fact that Arnold's most popular poems are elegies, memorial verses, Scholar Gypsy, Thyrsis, Rugby Chapel, or poignant lyrics, smaller poems, say Dover Beach to Margaret, points in the direction contrary to his own liking, originating, and dramatic work like Merope and Baldersdale. Uh, Besides his concern with the subjective element, Arnold was inclined towards romanticism in his deep and lasting relationship with nature, which found a sustained expression in such poems as the Scholar Gypsy and Thyrsis and Dover Beach. As J.D. Jump observes, it is remarkable how many of Arnold's finer poems consist of elegiac brooding more or less, ultimately linked up with symbolic landscapes. And the repeated and sensuous rendering of the English countryside suggests Arnold's own longing for a freshness and spontaneity not easily attainable by one who is committed to hard and uncongenial work for a living. But the strain of melancholy running through Arnold's verse is not entirely a phenomenon internalized by the personality of the poet. It was interwoven with the intellectual, social and religious levels of Victorian society that Arnold experienced. He could therefore with some justice write to his mother in 1869 that my poems represent on the whole the main movement of mind of the last quarter of a century. Earlier in stanzas from the Grand Chartreuse, which appeared in 1853, he had visualized his situation as wandering between two worlds, one day the other powerless to be born, with nowhere yet to rest my head. It's very agonizing, very poignant, and throws a light on the plight we find ourselves in. It actually elaborates the contemporary society, the malaise which plagues, which haunts contemporary society, and it actually summarizes the state in which our civilization is. It points to the failure we have encountered, the helpless situation we find ourselves in, and it suggests helplessness and hopelessness, spurred by ennui, solitude, frustration, and shattering of dreams, treachery, deception, going back on morals or promises, so to say. Because of his classicism, Arnold did not give in to his age but fought it as a poet, as a critic, and as an educationist, seeking redemption through his philosophical interest and tenacity. He rejected Tennyson's sentimentality, he rejected Tennyson's ornamentation, as well as Robert Browning's obscurities and intellectual abundance, consciously choosing a fusion of feeling and intellect and applying it more regularly to the main line of development in his times. But the romantic propensities of the poet Matthew Arnold often disbanded this derived fusion in his verse, making him too reflective and ruminative to be acceptable to readers in his own times. Nevertheless, it has to be asserted that in his struggle with a difficult period in history and with the complex craft of words, Arnold left behind at least a small group of poems which places him among the significant poets of the English language. To yield their best, his works have to be placed in the perspective of his life, beliefs, ideas, experiences and times, and then read meticulously and with an awareness of Arnold's careful craftsmanship and expression. Uh, this is what I think uh, is Arnold's poetry uh, amounts to. And we know that as a Victorian poet, he stands above other poets and he reflects his as very accurately its scientific spirit and its religious leanings and its skepticism or doubt or its hankering for the ideals which we have lost and arriving at the certainty through his work, uh, which was exemplified by the classical poets, and it is to classical literature that he looks up to for inspiration, and he achieved much more than other poets could, and he is still revered. His poems still resonate with us, and they sort of provide not only an ironical comment on the society or the contemporary life we lead or contemporary civilization, but they guide us to something very optimistic. They end on an optimistic note. Pathos, no doubt, permeates them, but we see light at the end of the tunnel. And there is an ironical vein which courses through his poems, which opens our eyes towards reality, and we learn something from his craft, that we should ameliorate society and we should turn over a new leaf, and whatever evils that persist in society, they have to be weeded out. And so he inspires us to lead a better life, and this is the pursuit of the poet, and it is visible throughout all his poems. And as a writer of elegies, he stands out, and we will learn about the elegiac form tomorrow. Thank you.